So I'm a UX designer at Clearleft in Brighton. Mostly do kind of strategic stuff nowadays, not so much interface, but I've been thinking about voice a lot. It's been on my mind, and I've been investing in buying some of the products and trying them out. So I'm going to talk to you about that today. But kind of really where I started was this kind of idea of the apocalypse. It's the idea really that voice actually makes a lot of apps redundant. And it might make designers redundant in many ways. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So I'm going to just get technical now. I'm going to say the word VUI a lot. And it kind of sucks, right? It just sounds horrible to say it. But actually, once upon a time, GUI was that kind of sucky to say, right? So I'm going to use it. Sorry. And if we take the kind of eye of Sauer on and look at ourselves, right? When we look at other industries and we think, how are you going to get disrupted? How are we going to get disrupted as designers? Because voice is a big part of that. And there's a product that kind of, well, there's a few products that embody this idea, but I'm going to show you one which I saw in San Francisco by AutoCAD. It's called DREAMCATCHER. And it's a 3D design tool where you basically just feed it parameters and it will change the design for you. It'll iterate for you. So it will, you say, right, I want my bike to be lighter, or I want it to be stronger, or I want it to have a better power to weight ratio. You're just pulling levers. Imagine one of Jason's music UIs, and it will do the designing and the restructuring for you. That's pretty scary. It makes you start to rethink what a designer is. And Dan Sauer put it well when he said, future-proof yourself by ensuring that the kind of work you do cannot be easily replicated by an algorithm. Well, I think voice is a part of that, and I'm going to talk about it today. But right now, voice user interfaces, VUI, they kind of suck in a lot of ways. I'm sure you've experienced this. And to me, it's sort of the equivalent of this, right? It's just kind of flailing around all over the place and not quite sure whether it will work. And I know some of you may have attended Deconstruct, one of our events last year. Quick show of hands, who went? A few? Okay, not too bad. I want to show you a film which really embodies the kind of awkwardness of technology right now, and it's called Curious Rituals. And what the interest here is when technology is mundane. So you saw from Jason a very grand vision of the future in a kind of ridiculous video where everything is a touchable screen. This is the opposite of that. What's it like for the everyday? So yeah, you can see the obsession there is with the small mistakes, the everyday mundane. I highly encourage everybody to watch the whole film. It's really interesting, it goes into a lot more depth. And something happened to me while I was kind of writing this talk, which illustrates another problem about voice. And I was thinking about, which apps would be more efficient using voice only. And one of the ones I started thinking about was Shazam. And you can actually use Shazam through Siri. So you can just talk to your phone, what song is this? It listens for a while, and then it tells you what the song is, right? But the reality is that actually I didn't know that Siri could do this until somebody told me. So I use Shazam a lot, but I needed to be told specifically that Siri could do this. And the reason I didn't know, even though I've been using Siri for years, is that VUI has no affordance, right? It has no way to tell you what it can do, right? It's kind of this invisible thing, and that's a real problem. People that I know who use Siri, they kind of try a few things with it, and then they kind of realize the limits of it, and then they give up, and then they never discover anything else because there's nothing to tell you what it can do, right? And my analogy is that VUI's a bit like dealing with Manuel, right? He has a limited shared vocabulary, kind of poor skills and coordination, no capacity to kind of learn, and ultimately you're never really sure the job is going to get done. Right, that's kind of where we are now. And if we think about broader principles, which Jason touched on, of which mode of UI is best, right? Bill Buxton said this: everything is best for something and worse for something else. The trick is knowing what is what, for what, when, for whom, where, and most importantly, why. So we need to start thinking about mixed mode, as Jason touched on, right? It's not about one thing. But if we think about VUI and think it's kind of clunky right now, it is getting really serious amounts of investment, okay? So Apple has just opened a Siri lab in Cambridge. Amazon have a $100 million startup fund if you want to add voice to your technology. So if you've got a startup right now, you think voice might play a part in it, you can get money from Amazon. I know some friends in San Francisco who will not tell me what they're working on, but I know it's voice related. very large sums of money going towards voice right now. And if we think about the history of how things emerge, well, here's PLATO 4, it's touch technology, multi-touch, in 1972, right? Or if you think about mouse, 1960, I'm going to say 7, but mass adoption is 30 years later. Same with touch, right? So are we at that point with voice right now? It's been around for a while, it's kind of clunky, it's got a very poor reputation in like phone systems, right? Customer service centers, we all hate dealing with those things. But actually we might be at some sort of tipping point right now with voice. What's the vision? Where are we going with this? Well, it's kind of ubiquitous computing, or UBIComp. This comes out of some of the Californian thinkers in the 70s, strongly associated with Xerox as well. So it's the idea, I guess, that computing's everywhere, it's embedded, we don't have to give it any special attention, no kind of digging into our pockets for the precious. We all kind of like, it kind of goes away and it kind of becomes invisible, and that's how voice might fit in. So the promise of UI is to simplify complex interactions into directly expressed goals. And I guess talking about visions, well, here's one, and Jason mentioned it, it's the movie Her. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend it, because the level of design detail they go into in this film, it's not just about falling in love with an artificial intelligence. Have a look at how they've shaped the world in this film. It's very rare that a Hollywood film gets this kind of level of design attention and care. So I'm just going to play you a clip now. He's playing a game at home, our protagonist, and he gets an email. Okay, so I'm going to point out a few details there. Notice the kind of piss-takey tone she took with him when he kind of spoke in that robotic voice. Because she's an upgrade. Samantha is an upgrade, and his old one was kind of robotic, and he ended up speaking robotically to it. And that's actually what happens with UIs. We speak robotically to them because we try to be more consistent and make sure they understand us. They change us. It's kind of weird. It's not very natural. Second thing I would point out is that she was reading his emails. That is crazy. Who wants their emails read out to them? That is nuts. It would be much more efficient for him to process that information by putting it up on screen. And then the final thing I point out is the multimodal nature, right? This mixture of things all going on at once, blended, right? Finding the right thing for the right moment. Now, there's one product that gets very, really right, and I'm going to kind of talk about that now. I have one at home. We've had it for a few months, and it has quite significantly changed our family life and environment. And it is the Amazon Echo. You can't buy it here. It doesn't work really that well in the UK because you can't tie it to your postcode and things like that. But what do we use it for? Well, it's radio, Pandora. As of last week, it has Spotify. I can now listen to anything on Spotify on command. Pretty damn awesome. It manages a shopping list. You set cooking timers. The kids get jokes off of it. It's pretty awesome. So you can just say things like this, and it pops up on your phone. It's pretty amazing. And running your shopping list is much easier this way. Really, seriously, much easier. A sign that it's really, really good to me is the fact that the kids have started using it on us, right? So we were using it for a little while to set limits on Minecraft use, like, Ellie, you can only have half an hour. Alexa, set a timer for 30 minutes. Bam, done. Now, if I say to my kids, well, I'll be with you and play with you in 15 minutes, they run downstairs to the kitchen and they set a timer on us. That's pretty nuts and a real sign of the success of the product. So why is it so good? Let's talk about that. So it's in a hands-free context. The kitchen is kind of like the perfect place to have an interface with no screens involved. Its noise filtering and recognition is amazing, has 7 microphones in it. I can generally talk to it from the next room, not just the kitchen. Highly focused feature set, so it's not trying to be a product that does everything. And that's really, really important when we're designing. I'll go back one. I'll just tell you that I saw this app on the Echo App Store, which was for like helping women choose their bra size. And I was like, yeah, who does that in the kitchen? That's kind of crazy, right? It's not really in the spirit of the product itself. And my daughter, when it came to the Echo, she said this. Sorry, I've just previewed that quote. Sorry. Skip through my slides. She said, speaking to Alexa is a bit like a Jedi mind trick, isn't it, Daddy? Tell her what to do, she repeats it, and then does it. I was like, wow, kid. It just blew my mind. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what happens. It's magic. It is one of those weirdly magical interfaces. It's actually not that smart. It doesn't really have great AI behind it. It's pretty dumb if you've ever tried to design for it. It's literally like inputting thousands of sort of sentence variations. It may appear smart, it really, really isn't, but it doesn't make it not useful. So speaking of the intelligence and the interpretation, I'm going to show you another product called Hound. Okay, so I think they might have some work to do with the expression, the brand of their product, but you can see how smart that was, right? And this is the field of natural language understanding, NLU. So speech recognition is one domain, so where it actually recognizes the words. Actually interpreting that into actions is a whole other domain, and that's where things are really taking off with machine learning at the moment. So yeah, I mean, imagine if something like that was better connected to apps, and that's what you can do. They have an API. You can embed Hound in your apps now. So onto the galactic empire of our industry. Apple TV is pretty cool. And again, think about context there. It's really interesting that, you know, the living room is a really great use of input for the living room. And it's multimodal as well. You have to push a button to instantiate Siri, and then you're jumping between the screen and this touch gesture thing and the Siri button. So they recognize, yeah, it can't be everything to everyone from one mode. But let's take a bad example of voice from the same company. You can actually have Siri read you out search results, like reading out an email. That's freaking nuts, right? So sometimes, you know, this vision of no UI is completely wrong. As Jason said, it's just, it's a very limited view of things. So if we think about multimodal, right, what are we doing here? Well, when the mouse was added to the keyboard, it created this harmonious kind of link between the two modes of input, right? And that's what we're looking for with voice. When we add it to things, we want it to work harmoniously with other modes of input. So is adding graceful VUI, like, is it pairing with touch interfaces to do that, like keyboard was to mouse? I don't know, maybe. The other thing we have to watch out for is, what are our tillers? Scott Jensen at Google, ex-Apple, this is his take. So at one of our events, he spoke about the tillers, right? When cars were created, the first thing they used to steer them was tillers, because they hadn't quite figured out that the steering wheel, which did exist on boats, if you think about it, was the better metaphor. So are we using the wrong metaphors when we think about how we fit these things together? Because we've probably got some historical stuff going on in our minds. I know that historically, because of my work, I think in terms of screens and pages. I don't think in terms of context and sensors so much. There's something missing from the way I do things. And I guess the other thing to make voice really work is what I would just call connective tissue, right? APIs, standards that allow you to jump between both devices and modes of input. Like, if I'm in the kitchen, I might want to say to the Echo, Alexa, call my mum on Skype in the living room. Well, my Xbox does that, but these things don't talk to each other. Everybody's trying to own the platform, right? That's a terrible way to go. Actually, that's not going to help us make these things work harmoniously together. Now, I don't know how to solve that problem, but you can see it is a huge problem. The current ways of connecting things together are pretty pony, and actually, if you compare it to kind of old things like, you know, what it takes to play music on one of my docks, well, move to the dock, push the Bluetooth button, press home to wake the phone. It's a lot of steps. Compare that to just walking up to an old CD player and just pressing play. It's pretty awful, right? It's painful. And actually, when Jason touched on this, right, the price of a multifunctional touchscreen is the volume of required input, right? The more it does, the more you have to do to input and get what you want out of it. And actually, VUI is a really, really efficient shortcut for that. Another thing I would say is that we've got to start thinking beyond use cases. This is just a silly example I thought of recently, but you know, I drove to B&Q recently, and I needed to nip in for like 30 seconds, but Joe fell asleep in the car, my son, and I just wanted to say to my car, can you just call me if he wakes up? Right? But you couldn't design for that scenario. You probably couldn't. It was just an improvised thing that I wanted to see happen in the world. When the sensors, the voice technology, all this stuff comes together, we can express it and have these sensors work on our behalf, then this will work. But the design practice must change, because you couldn't possibly dream up edge cases like that. But connective tissue is coming. We're starting to see this in the platforms. So Google are playing around with this at the moment. You can sort of jump. So you're messaging, and then you can jump into something interesting. Oh, we've noticed you're talking about a restaurant. and then you can open that in different apps, and then see something in OpenTable about that. So we know this stuff is coming. In the code bases, they are starting to think about how to connect these apps together. When I originally gave this talk a few months ago, my point here was, when can I say, hey Siri, call me an Uber? Well, that is already possible as of last week on the Amazon Echo. Don't need the Uber app anymore. We'll soon have Uber in Brighton. So it's coming, and when it does, it's going to render a lot of things redundant, like this, right? This is the Shazam app, which I mentioned earlier. I mean, if you've used the GUI, it's kind of shouty and needy, and it's trying to grab your attention and sell you their latest thing. I don't need it. I just want to know what that music is playing. This GUI is redundant. So no swiping, no tapping, no icon, no GUI, no brand, no upsell, no in-app purchases, no notifications. Redundant. And this is not new either. We think this might be new. It's not. If you think about what Unix is, that thing that sits in our pockets, it is thousands of tiny bits of software all interconnected. How many of those can you name? There's a few sysadmin kind of people here who could name a couple, maybe, but I can't name very many. We don't know they exist, we don't care, we don't need to know. So this unimaginable complexity that works behind the scenes, that's kind of, I think, where our destiny is, particularly with Vuri. And again, Steve Jobs said, Dropbox, when he tried to buy it, he said, it's a feature. It's not a product. It's just there. It's just something that works. The cloud just works for us. We don't need to think about it. Don't need to brand it. Don't need to shout about it. It's just there. It works. Okay, so I'll talk a bit about designing for Vuri now. What are the roles it can have when we're thinking about whether to use it? So dictation, it can take words for you. We used it a little bit for that. Interestingly, my wife now uses Siri for that a lot more than she used to because we've got Echo in the home. She's much more comfortable using dictation on other products now that it's become socially acceptable in our household to talk to machines. It can do identification, so it could be your bouncer in a product. It can be a gopher. So what I mean by that is performing simple tasks, call me an Uber, that sort of thing. And finally, the vision, as in the movie Her, is that it's this magical assistant that can work out and anticipate things for you. Apple and Google are trying, and Amazon now, are trying to sell us that their products are this, but they are definitely not this. They're not smart enough yet. They are gophers. They are smart gophers. They are not really great assistants. Who knows with machine learning when that will come? What is Vuri no good at? It's no good at large amounts of input. It's kind of really painful if you start thinking about filling out a tax form or something that way. It's no good at presenting choice. Unless you're comfortable making choices for you. It's not very good at kind of the way we communicate naturally, like when we hesitate. In fact, they're just generally awful at that. I don't know how they're going to solve that problem because we interrupt each other and pause all the time. It's also no good at what I'd call fuzzy tasks. So Abby Jones, she's a voice designer at Google. She decided to carry around a voice recorder and just record herself issuing commands to the world. Here's her quote. She said, "It made me realize how hard it was to say what I wanted in the world." So let's say you were shopping for a gift or something, right? You kind of walk into the shopping center or just casually browse. You might not actually be able to put into words what you really want. And so there's a cognitive load involved in putting some tasks into words. Obvious one, security, privacy, huge problem with Vuri. And noisy environments. I created this slide before I'd had kids' parties in my house, but I can now testify that Amazon's Echo is completely useless with more than 2 kids in a kitchen. So, some opportunities then. Search results in the platform. So now the platforms will allow us to produce search. If our app does produce lists of stuff, we can now search that through the platform. So you can ask for things that way. And we kind of got to find ways to let people know it can do that. In-app, so using the Vuri in the app. So if you think of like ASOS, could it have a discrete microphone button where you can say, show me all the red dresses in size 6 that are on sale, something like that. Again, you've got to kind of let people know it's possible, but how? Google obviously are really pushing this hard. If you've seen the sort of Google Now ads at the moment, and what's particularly interesting about that is the social context. They're interested in socially normalizing the behavior of searching that way. If you notice, the ads always have 2 people. So simple Gopher tasks. I use this expense app, Pennies, which I believe was made in Brighton. Is that right? Yeah. You're not here, are you? Anyway, yeah, wonderful app for tracking expenses. Like, I would much rather be able to just go, in the right context, record an expense for £2 or something. Much simpler. And we know that the platforms are already building that link between the voice and the apps. They just haven't allowed us to perform actions that way yet. And the final thing I'd say about designing for VUI, penultimate thing I would say is do role play. So this is something I learned in Dave Gray's Game Storming, which is an absolutely awesome book if you're interested. You can actually pretend that one of you is the machine and one of you is the user. And actually you can do that with screens as well, right? It's a really nice way of designing. And then finally, I guess, think about context. What is the context of what you are thinking about? Because this product just would not work in my living room. You'd think it would. It absolutely wouldn't. I wouldn't use it like even a tenth of the time, the Amazon Echo, in my living room. Mark Reiser, the sort of father of ubiquitous computing, said, the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they are indistinguishable from it. I can't really think of another mode of input or a technology that best fits that description, right? Voice is, it disappears. And also, it's one of our oldest technologies, right? It is just the fabric of life. So that's all I have to say about voice. I'm just going to tack on a few things about IoT because I know some of you may be designing in this space. I went to San Francisco to O'Reilly's conference, Solid. And it was a great trip. And it was kind of a case study in, I guess, how innovation happens. But really, I saw an incredible plethora of really, really sort of pointless products that I don't think anybody will ever buy. But there's a kind of paradox in that because you've got to have that bedrock of innovation, of people doing strange things with the technology and fetishizing the fact that we can now, get a Wi-Fi chip and an 8266 board off from China for like £3. And then doing something interesting with it. But as Jason said, you can become a magpie with this stuff and fetishize that you can do something without knowing whether it's really a good idea. And what I come back to is Ursula Franklin. She had this series of lectures that's turned into a book called The Real World of Technology. And I'm paraphrasing here, but she said that really what we need to think of is technology is not things. It's what happens to society when you make things that change us. It's practice. And it's really easy for us to think it's not, it's the things, right? So my interpretation for this is that therefore we need to think about outcomes and not outputs, right? It's really easy to be the magpie, to think about the tech. Steve Jobs put it well when he said, you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology, not the other way around. Really. And I'm as guilty of that as anyone. I love playing on my Arduinos at home. But you've got to start with what you're trying to make possible for people and what kind of people we want to be. As I mentioned in my voice talk, right? I now speak like a robot in my kitchen. Is that what we really want? I don't know. But thank you.